I had exactly 3 minutes before the elevator chimes would signal the end of Ryu Seo-jun's life. My thumb pressed hard against the ceramic of his espresso cup, the heat blooming against my skin like a warning I couldn't scream out loud. Underneath the saucer, the note was a jagged piece of stationery, the ink barely dry, feeling like a live wire ready to electrocute me before I could set it down. The Ryu Corp penthouse was a symphony of silent, predatory success, the hum of the air filtration system, the soft click of $2,000 loafers on polished obsidian, the distant, rhythmic tap of a keyboard. Outside, the Chicago skyline was a jagged gray teeth line under a bruising morning sky, but inside the glass walls, everything was sterile, perfect, and dead. I approached the executive desk like a woman walking toward a firing squad. Ryu Seo-jun sat framed by the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city he owned spread out behind him like a conquest. He was terrifyingly still, a man of sharp angles and obsidian eyes, his tailored black suit absorbing the morning light. The ink of a dragon's tail peeked just above his starched white collar, the only hint of the monster beneath the CEO. Beside him, Vivienne Moreau leaned over his shoulder, her auburn hair smelling of expensive jasmine as she pointed at something on his tablet. She looked like the perfect partner, serene and loyal. She wasn't. 12 minutes ago, I hadn't been checking the board meeting minutes. I'd been monitoring the encrypted internal server for a routine security sweep when I intercepted the maintenance protocol sent from his brother Hyunji's private terminal. It wasn't a protocol. It was a kill switch for the boardroom's ventilation and locks. I had frozen in my ergonomic chair, my breath hitching as the digital map showed the cleaning crew, armed mercenaries, already entering the service bays. Boardroom Alpha, the message had read. Clear the king from the board. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I walked toward the desk, the tray in my hands feeling heavier with every step. I had to be perfect. If I tripped or looked too scared, Vivienne would notice. She was busy showing Seo-jun something on a tablet, her voice low and sweet, like honey hiding a sharp sting. Seo-jun didn't look up as I drew near. He was focused, his powerful frame still and calm. The neck tattoo on his skin looked like a dark warning in the bright office light. I reached out and picked up the espresso cup I had brought from the kitchen, the one that was safe. With a quick, practiced motion, I swapped it for the cup sitting right in front of him. Vivienne didn't even blink. She was too busy talking about the big meeting, her eyes fixed on the screen. She thought she had already won. She didn't know that I had seen her secret messages. She didn't know that I was the only thing standing between Seo-jun and a trap he couldn't see. I set the new cup down carefully. I made sure the tiny piece of folded paper was tucked right under the bottom of the saucer. Only a small corner of the white stationery peeked out, just enough for him to see. Seo-jun's hand moved. His long, steady fingers reached for the handle of the cup. For a second, time seemed to stop. I held my breath, my skin feeling cold despite the warmth of the room. He felt the paper. I saw his eyes shift, just a tiny bit, toward the saucer. He didn't jump. He didn't gasp. He was a man used to danger. He picked up the cup to take a sip, and as he did, his thumb caught the note. He pulled it into his palm with the skill of a magician. While Vivienne kept talking about the important guests waiting for them in the boardroom, Seo-jun lowered the cup and glanced down at his hand. I watched his face. His jaw tightened for a split second, a small muscle jumping in his cheek. That was the only sign that he had read my words. Don't go to the meeting. Your brother already signed your death warrant. He looked up then, and for the first time, his dark eyes locked onto mine. There was no anger there, only a cold, sharp understanding. We were speaking without words. He knew I had saved him, and he knew that from this moment on, everything had changed. I wasn't just his secretary anymore. I was his only ally in a building full of ghosts and killers. He set the cup down with a soft click and stood up, his gaze never leaving my face. The hunt had begun. Seo-jun did not say a word. He stood up slowly and adjusted his suit jacket. His face was like a mask of stone. Vivienne looked up at him, her smile still bright and fake. She asked him if he was ready to go to the meeting. Seo-jun just nodded, but instead of walking toward the main doors where his guards waited, he turned toward his private office door. I left my phone on the desk, he said. His voice was deep and steady. It did not shake at all. Vivienne frowned for a second. She looked at the clock on the wall. We had only 5 minutes left. Hurry, darling, she said. Your brother is already waiting for us in the boardroom. I followed Seo-jun into the inner office. As soon as the heavy wood door closed, the air changed. The calm act was over. Seo-jun didn't go for a phone. He went straight for a hidden panel in the wall. He pulled out a small, sleek handgun and tucked it into his belt. "The private elevator," he whispered to me. "It leads straight to the garage. We are leaving." I felt a spark of hope. If we could get to the elevator, we could escape the trap. We ran toward the small silver doors at the back of the room. Seo-jun pressed his thumb against the scanner. The light turned green, and the doors slid open. We stepped inside the small glass box. But as the doors started to close, a loud, sharp siren began to scream through the building. The red lights in the hallway began to flash. "Override detected," a cold, computer voice said over the speakers. The elevator didn't move. I pressed the buttons, but they were dead. Outside the glass, I saw the computer screens in the office turn bright red. My heart sank. Hyun-jae had found out. He wasn't waiting for the meeting anymore. He was locking us in. "My brother is fast," Seo-jun muttered. He punched the control panel, but nothing happened. We were stuck in a cage made of glass and steel. Through the office windows, I saw the main doors burst open. Men in black tactical gear ran into the room. They weren't the usual building guards. They were killers. They looked around, their guns raised and ready. "Down!" Seo-jun yelled. He grabbed my arm and pulled me to the floor of the elevator just as the first bullets hit the glass. The shadow war had started. We were trapped 60 floors up, and the only way out was through the men who wanted us dead. I looked at Seo-jun. He wasn't looking at the shooters. He was looking at the ceiling hatch. He was already planning our next move. The sound of bullets hitting the glass was like ice cracking. Seo-jun pulled me close to the floor as the elevator stayed stuck. We were sitting ducks in this glass box. He looked at the ceiling hatch, but I grabbed his sleeve. I knew this building better than anyone. I had spent years walking these halls when no one was looking. "The maintenance panel," I whispered. I pointed to a small metal plate near the floor of the elevator. "If I can open that, I can talk to the building's brain." Seo-jun didn't ask questions. He used the back of his gun to pop the plate open. A mess of colorful wires and a small screen appeared. My fingers moved fast. As the secretary, I had the master passwords to everything. I wasn't just a girl who fixed his schedule, I was the ghost who kept the whole office running. I typed a code into the small screen. Suddenly, the flashing red lights in the office went dark. The cameras on the walls drooped like dying flowers. I had blinded them. "The cameras are off," I said, my heart thumping. And I just unlocked the service hatch. Above us, the ceiling of the elevator clicked open. Seo-jun stood up and jumped, grabbing the edge. He pulled himself up and then reached back down for me. His grip was like iron. He pulled me into the dark, dusty space above the elevator car. It was narrow and filled with pipes, but it was safe from the shooters. "This way," I led the way, crawling through the small tunnel. We were in the service corridors now. These were the invisible paths used by plumbers and cleaners. The walls were plain grey concrete, far away from the golden glass of the main office. We moved quietly through the dark. I could hear the heavy boots of the killers running on the other side of the walls. They were screaming and confused because the cameras weren't working. They didn't know where we had gone. "You are more than just a secretary, Amora," Seo-jun said behind me. His voice was low and serious. "I've been watching this place for a long time," I replied. I led him to a small ladder that went down into the heart of the building. "I know a way to the basement that doesn't show up on any map." We were moving fast now. The air was cold and smelled like dust, but I felt stronger than I ever had. For years, I had been a shadow in this company. Now, that shadow was the only thing keeping the king alive. We reached a heavy steel door, and I pressed my master key card against the lock. It turned green. We were one step closer to the exit, but the hardest part was still ahead of us. We scrambled down the last flight of cold concrete stairs, our breathing heavy in the quiet air. The heavy door at the bottom groaned as Seo-jun pushed it open. We were finally in the parking garage. Row after row of expensive black cars sat under the buzzing lights. It looked like a graveyard for giants. "There," Seo-jun pointed to a massive, matte black SUV parked in a private corner. "The armored one. Get in." But as we ran across the open space, the screech of tires echoed off the walls. Two silver cars roared around the corner, blocking our path. Men jumped out before the cars even stopped moving. They didn't say a word. They just started shooting. The noise was deafening. Sparks flew off the concrete pillars as bullets chipped away at the stone. Seo-jun pushed me behind a thick pillar and fired back. His face was calm, but his eyes were like fire. "Amora, take the keys," he shouted, tossing a heavy fob toward me. "I'll cover you. You have to drive." "Me?" I gasped, catching the keys. "I've never driven anything like that." "You're the only one who can," he yelled over the sound of gunfire. I didn't have time to be afraid. I stayed low, crawling toward the driver's side of the big SUV. Bullets pinged against the bulletproof glass like heavy rain. I pulled the door open and climbed into the seat. The inside smelled like expensive leather and old cigars. The dashboard was full of screens and glowing buttons. Seo-jun dove into the passenger seat just as a bullet shattered the side mirror.
"Go! Now!"
I slammed my foot on the gas. The engine roared like a monster waking up. The heavy car jumped forward, throwing me back against the seat. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. One of the silver cars tried to block the exit, but I didn't slow down. I felt a strange surge of power. For years, I had followed everyone else's lead. Now, I was the one holding the wheel. I crashed the front of our heavy SUV into the side of the silver car. The sound of bending metal was loud, but our car barely felt it. We pushed right through them. I spun the wheel, sliding the back of the SUV around as we headed for the ramp.
"Keep going,"
Seo-jun commanded, checking his gun. "Don't look back." As we burst out into the cold Chicago air, I realized something. My hands were shaking, but I wasn't stopping. I had taken control of our lives. We were out of the building, but the blood on the ledger was only just beginning to dry. We were moving fast, and for the first time, I was the one leading the way. The heavy gates of the estate swung open like the jaws of a giant. We drove up the long, winding path until the city lights were far behind us. Seo-jun's private home sat on top of a hill, a house made of dark stone and thick glass. It looked less like a home and more like a fortress. I turned off the engine, and for a moment, the silence was so loud it made my ears ring. Seo-jun didn't move right away. He sat in the passenger seat, his breath slowly becoming steady. He looked at the dashboard I had just used to save our lives. Then, he looked at me. I was still gripping the steering wheel so hard my fingers felt stiff. My burgundy dress was wrinkled, and my hair was a mess, but I was alive. "Come inside," he said. His voice was soft, but it carried a lot of weight. Inside the house, everything was cold and modern. Huge windows showed the dark forest outside. Seo-jun walked over to a small table and poured 2 glasses of water. He handed one to me. As our fingers touched, I felt a shiver. He wasn't the scary boss from the office anymore. He looked tired, but his eyes were sharper than ever. "I knew my brother, Hyun-jae, was weak," Seo-jun said, staring out at the trees. "I knew he was jealous. I thought I could handle him. But I was wrong. I didn't see the trap until you put that paper under my cup." He turned to face me. He stepped closer, until he was standing right in front of me. He was much taller, and his shadow fell over me like a blanket. "And you, Amora. I have seen you every day for years. I thought you were just a quiet girl who liked her job. I didn't realize you were this strong. I didn't know you could drive like a soldier or think like a spy." I looked down at my glass. "I just didn't want you to die," I whispered. Seo-jun reached out and tilted my chin up so I had to look at him. His expression was very serious. "In my world, we have a rule. If someone saves your life, you belong to them, and they belong to you. It is a debt of life." The air in the room felt thick. I realized then that I could never go back to my old life. I wasn't just a secretary anymore. By saving him, I had stepped into his dangerous world. "You are under my protection now," he promised. "But I am also in your hands. Whatever you need, it is yours. My house, my men, and my life. We are in this together now." I nodded slowly. The fear was still there, but beneath it, I felt a new kind of heat. I had saved the king, and now the king owed me everything. We stood there in the glass fortress, 2 people who were no longer strangers, waiting for the sun to rise on a brand new war. Seo-jun led me to a private room filled with glowing computer screens. This was the brain of the house. He pulled out a chair for me and stood back, giving me the space to work. Vivienne thinks she is smart, he said, his voice cold. She thinks her money is hidden where I can't find it. Show her she is wrong. I sat down and felt the familiar click of the keys under my fingers. In the office, I was just a secretary. People thought I only organized files and answered phones. They didn't know that I was a master of the digital world. I knew every password, every secret account, and every hidden door in the company's computer system. I started by looking at Vivienne's personal spending. She was very careful. On the surface, she only bought expensive dresses and jewelry. But I began to dig deeper into the company's digital ledgers. I looked for the tiny ghost transactions that most people would miss. My eyes moved fast across the lines of code. I found a path that led to an offshore bank in a tiny country across the ocean. Vivienne had been moving small amounts of money for months. It looked like a trail of breadcrumbs left by a wolf. I found it, I whispered. I traced the money from that bank to a private security company. These were the men who had attacked us in the garage. I saw the digital signature of Ryu Hyunjae, Seo-jun's brother, on the final payment. They hadn't just used their own money, they had stolen from Seo-jun's own company to pay for his death. They are using your own wealth as a shield, I explained to Seo-jun. But I can take it away. With a few more taps on the keyboard, I began to lock their accounts. I sent a digital command to the bank to freeze every dollar. I watched as the numbers on the screen turned from green to a frozen, icy blue. One by one, their financial armor was falling off. Without that money, the mercenaries would stop fighting. They wouldn't risk their lives for people who couldn't pay them. I hit the enter key one last time. It's done. They are broke. Seo-jun leaned over and looked at the screen. A slow, dark smile spread across his face. He put a hand on my shoulder, and I could feel how much he trusted me now. We weren't just running anymore. We were fighting back. Vivienne and Hyunjae were about to find out that the invisible secretary was the most dangerous person in the room. I had taken their power, and now they had nowhere left to hide. The victory over the bank accounts did not last long. My phone buzzed on the desk, vibrating against the wood like a warning. I picked it up, expecting a message from the office. Instead, a video began to play. My breath caught in my throat. I saw my younger sister, Maya, sitting in a dark room. Her hands were tied, and her eyes were wide with fear. A man stood behind her, but I could only see his expensive watch, the same gold watch I had seen Ryu Hyunjae wearing 1,000 times. The money for her life, a voice hissed through the speaker. Bring the codes to the old shipyard in 1 hour. If I see a single guard, she dies. The phone went black. I felt like the floor had vanished beneath me. My sister was the only family I had left. She was innocent. She didn't know about the mafia or the secret wars. She just thought I worked a boring office job. Seo-jun saw my face and grabbed the phone. His eyes turned as cold as ice. He is desperate, Seo-jun said. He knows he has lost his money, so he is acting like a trapped animal. This is a trap, Amora. If we go there, he will kill all of us. We have to go. I cried, my voice cracking. He has Maya. Seo-jun gripped my shoulders. I know, but we cannot go as victims. We have to go as hunters. I looked at my shaking hands. For a second, I wanted to hide. I wanted to be the invisible assistant again, the one who just took notes and stayed out of trouble. But that girl couldn't save Maya. That girl would just watch her family get hurt. I wiped my tears away and looked at the computer screens. I realized that being an assistant meant I knew how to plan every detail. I knew how to move people like chess pieces. I wasn't just a helper anymore. I had to be a player in this deadly game. He wants the codes. I said, my voice becoming steady. I'll give him codes. But not the ones that unlock the money. I'll give him a virus that will shut down his entire communication system the moment he touches it. I turned back to the keyboard, my fingers flying. I wasn't just typing, I was building a trap of my own. I looked at Seo-jun. You get your guns ready. I will handle the digital side. We aren't going there to give up. We are going there to finish this. Seo-jun nodded, a look of respect in his eyes. He handed me a small, hidden earpiece. Welcome to the game, Amora. We headed for the car. The sun was going down, and the shadows were getting long. I wasn't a shadow anymore. I was the person holding the light, and I was going to burn Hyunji's world down to save my sister. The shipyard was quiet, but the air felt heavy. My heart was thumping in my ears as we stepped out of the car. Huge metal shipping containers stood all around us like giant rusty walls. In the center of the yard, under a single bright light, stood Hyunjae and Vivienne. My sister, Maya, was slumped in a chair between them. Seeing her there made me want to scream, but I had to stay calm. This was the most important meeting of my life. Hyunjae stepped forward. He looked messy and worried, not like the rich businessman he usually was. "The codes, Amora," he yelled. "Give me the digital keys to the accounts, or your sister pays the price." Seo-jun walked beside me. He looked like he was giving up. He kept his hands empty and visible. "You won, brother," Seo-jun said, his voice sounding tired. "The money is all yours. Just let the girl go." Vivienne laughed. It was a cold, mean sound. "We want more than the money now. We want your head on a platter." She looked at me with hate in her eyes. "And the secretary goes first for making us look like fools." I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small black tablet. "I have the codes right here," I said. My voice didn't shake. I felt a strange strength inside me. "Once I hit send, the money will move to your private bank. But first, let Maya walk to the car." Hyunjae waved his hand, and one of his men untied Maya. She ran toward our car, sobbing. As soon as she was safe inside, I looked at Seo-jun. I gave him a tiny nod. "Here is your money," I said. I tapped a large red button on the screen. But the money didn't move. Instead, every phone in the shipyard started to beep at once. The virus I had built was working. It didn't just lock their phones, it sent a signal to Seo-jun's loyal fixers who were hiding in the shadows. Suddenly, red laser dots appeared on Hyunji's chest. From the tops of the shipping containers, 10 men in black suits stood up, their guns pointed down at the traitors. They were the men who had worked for Seo-jun for years. They were the ones I had called using my secret access. The look of fear on Hyunji's face was better than any paycheck. He realized that Seo-jun hadn't come to surrender. He had come to hold a trial. "You thought she was just a secretary," Seo-jun said, stepping toward his brother. He wasn't acting tired anymore. He looked like a king again. "But she is the one who took your money. She is the one who found your men. And she is the one who just called your end." Vivienne tried to run, but 2 of our men blocked her path. The final board meeting was over. The traitors were surrounded, and for the first time, I wasn't just watching the power, I was the one who had used it. "Would you like me to write the final chapter, where Seo-jun reclaims his empire and Amora takes her place as his queen?" The shipyard grew quiet as the guards led Hyunjae and Vivienne away into the dark. They were no longer the powerful people who had tried to steal an empire. They were just shadows disappearing into the night. I stood there, my legs feeling a little weak, watching them go. The cold wind from the water blew through my hair, but for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of the chill. Seo-jun walked over to the car where Maya was waiting. He spoke to her softly, promising she would be safe and taken care of. Then, he turned back to me. The moon was high in the sky now, making his suit look like silver armor. He reached out and took my hand. His skin was warm, and his grip was steady. "It is over, Amora," he said. "The traitors are gone. The company is clean again." We drove back to the city in silence, but it was a good silence. We weren't running anymore. When we reached the Ryu Corp Tower, the sun was just starting to peek over the buildings. We went up to the very top floor, back to the office where everything had started. The glass walls showed the whole city waking up below us. Seo-jun didn't sit in his big leather chair. Instead, he walked to the long boardroom table. He pulled out the heavy chair at the very head of the table, the seat where only the boss ever sat today. He looked at me and signaled for me to come closer. "For years, you sat in the corner and took notes," Seo-jun said. "You were the ghost who kept my world running while I didn't even notice. But ghosts don't save kings. Partners do." He patted the back of the chair. "This seat is yours now, Amora. I don't want a secretary. I want someone who can see the traps I miss. I want an advisor. I want you by my side." I looked at the chair, And then I looked at the city. I thought about the girl who used to be scared of making a mistake on a coffee order. That girl was gone. I sat down in the chair, and it felt right. I wasn't just a shadow anymore. I was a player in the game. Seo-jun stood next to me, resting his hand on the table. We looked out at the tall buildings and the streets below. We were both monsters in our own way now. He had his guns and his power, and I had my secrets and my codes. In a world full of lies and betrayal, we had finally found the one thing that was harder to find than gold. We had found someone we could trust. As the sun filled the room with golden light, I knew that together, we would rule the city, and no one would ever overlook the secretary again.